What does tic-tac-toe and Minecraft have in common? Except being Nancy Pelosi's favorite games, of course.
An attempt to ban TikTok. It's an attempt to make TikTok better. Tic-tac-toe.
A winner.
While it's clear that they're both games, what makes them intriguing to play is their story. Yes, tic-tac-toe most definitely has some sort of story, just like chess could be interpreted as two kingdoms at war, where only one king will rule with the help of their army of pawns, knights, and their queen that does too much work only to be remembered as tic-tac-toe might have some similar story. It's existed for hundreds of years in most cultures, so someone must have had an engaging narrative that made this game so popular, right? But this video is not really about tic-tac-toe. It's about creating a story for a game. Hello and welcome everyone. This is my first video of my new project for this channel. I know I've been gone for a bit, but I've just had an existential crisis, I guess. Which, funny enough, happened somewhere around the release of my Soma video. For these past months, I've come to a realization. Within 5 years, I want to join the game industry. But I just haven't found out exactly what I want to do. That's why I want to explore different parts of game development so that I first of all have base knowledge of what it takes to be a part of this industry, but I also want to create a community where beginners and experienced people can reflect and discuss together, as I myself am not an expert. I guess you can just imagine me as your classmate from uni who shares her messy lecture notes with you. Recently, I've read a lot about narrative writing, and these two books are the ones I've got a lot of valuable information from. Hopefully, I'll be able to explain certain aspects of narrative writing so that not only me, but also you guys get an insight of what the tip of the iceberg might look like. I hope you enjoyed this, and remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Before we dive too deep, we should first understand what a story in a game is. Compared to a novel where we follow someone's thoughts, trusting that they give us a reliable description of their surroundings, or a film where we see the protagonist have to defuse a bomb within 1 minute but the whole sequence has lasted for 15 minutes, we can actually feel like we are part of the narrative in games. We can move around, interact with our surroundings, and even in certain games, take multiple narrative paths to create our own story. As mentioned by Michael Breault, I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, it's either that or Brio, but I'll go with Bro. So, according to Michael Breault, in narrative design, the craft of writing for games, a player needs a sense of agency in the game world, that their decisions or actions affect their surroundings, which make them feel empowered. So how can we explain player agency further? Timothy Kane, who has really inspiring and interesting reflections about his experience in the game industry, explains it as when the player decides to do something, whether it's as easy as hitting a wall so that it leaves a mark, or that NPCs react in a certain way when you do something so heinous and disgusting that no normal person would think of doing what you just did, you sick monster! Sorry. What I just mentioned are ways to perhaps build the world of your game. I couldn't find an exact term for these, but for me it sounds like external or surface elements of a game. What I mean by that is that these actions don't impact the core narrative. You can of course argue that going to jail in Skyrim is the player building their own story of the Dragonborn. But if you keep doing that over and over again, you might just be playing Jail Simulator rather than Skyrim. That doesn't mean that the player is the problem here. Maybe Skyrim hasn't really developed an interesting narrative that the player feels like they're part of. Luckily, this isn't really the case for Bethesda's favorite child since 2011.
Kill him! Kill him! Kill him! Fucking kill him!
This is, however, a discussion of emergent gameplay where unique experiences happen for each individual player, which I'll probably discuss in another video in the future. To understand how player agency should empower the player, one could ask, what will the story consequences be from the player's actions while creating a game? Sometimes, it may not be as big of a deal. Like in the Metal Gear Solid franchise, where going lethal or non-lethal doesn't really affect the story. An exception to this could be MGS3, where you can basically defeat a boss by being AFK and reloading a save after a week.
Drop your weapon. Drop your weapon!
This might make the player feel as if they directly affected the story's outcome. Games made by Telltale and Quantic Dream, which basically are interactive visual novels, and instead of hentai, you get awkward interactive scenes as a reward, are known for having direct story consequences depending on what the player decides to do. MGS is still a popular title without that type of narrative freedom because the gameplay matches the story with its innovative stealth gameplay that challenges the player and boss fights that feel personal for each complex character among many other factors. As I understand it, after reading both Michael Breault's book and Slay the Dragon Writing Great Video Games, written by Robert Denton Bryant and Keith Giglio, even if the story should be there to support and give context to gameplay, if there's no gameplay, then you might as well keep on writing fanfics on Wattpad if that still exists. This is why kindness chapters in the second playthrough of Nier might be boring to some. Even if it is a creative and fitting way of storytelling for that specific game, it might be too much text when the player has expected other types of gameplay. A wall of text in a game should perhaps then be optional, unless it's expected from the game, of course. Open world games like aforementioned Skyrim expand their story's universe with books that the player can read if they want to be more immersed in the world's history and culture. Many games that require one to read a book just demand the player to use it one time and immediately get a reward, such as skill points or quest information, without actually having to read it. No matter how free or linear a game is, it's important that the gameplay meshes with the story. Similar to how I used Metal Gear Solid as an example, we can look at Final Fantasy VII. Heavy spoilers for the original and Rebirth that just came out. Hopefully most of us know though what happens in these games, but just a warning though. In the original Final Fantasy VII, you have more or less one good and strong healer that you would rely on, which is Aerith. You basically spend at least 20 hours on getting through the first disc of the game, and in the end, she dies. But it gets worse. You immediately get put into a boss fight while Aerith's theme, which is a goddamn banger by the way, is playing, instead of that regular upbeat battle music. The first time this happens to you, emotions like anger, sadness, and confusion might come. If you haven't had a real reason why you want to defeat Sephiroth, you definitely have one now. I want to add to the argument about how gameplay and story should balance each other, or at least story should not take over, is that in Final Fantasy Rebirth, it really feels like you're actively fucking Jenova up with your attacks. The different phases, which took about 2-3 hours for me, I have to be honest, also use multiple characters and tactics to push through, which really makes you feel as if you're directly impacting the outcome of the battle. What all of these examples have in common is the impact of emotional engagement on the player's experience. Even if the story gives a reason for the gameplay, it should not just stop there. Slay the Dragon mentions that a story needs to change. It has to go through an emotional journey so that the player keeps being intrigued and invested. If you can reduce your game to a primal emotion, then the players can relate on a visceral level. It's a great explanation from Slay the Dragon, which describes how important emotions are for a game's story. These emotions can be anything from having the antagonist destroy your hometown and kill your favorite party member, to survive a zombie-infested world, or have your mentor defecate. Oh shit. Sorry, I mean defect and betray you.
I don't expect you to forgive me.
An interesting term used in the same book is empathetic immersion. When there's an emotional connection made between the player and the game, there's a good chance they'll stay and become a part of the game's world. One game that I believe checks many boxes of game development, but especially when it comes to immersing the player emotionally and mechanically, is Undertale. Certain spoilers, especially for the neutral ending, which I believe many first-time players will end up with, will be mentioned. So if you haven't played it, I'd recommend of course to play it first. The basic plot, which is different to the story, is that a human child falls underground into the world of monsters. They were banished here because of a war between humans and monsters a long time ago. The monsters wish to break the magical barrier that divides these two species and need one more human soul to do this, which is where the human child comes into the picture, who has to venture forth in this world, meeting and fighting different monsters until they reach their final destination. So, we now know the skeleton of what the game is about. The story is, however, when characters and environments are added and how they are affected by the plot. Michael Breault explains it in the way that people are fascinated by people. A dry recounting of a sequence of events leaves readers unmoved, no matter how important the events might be. But show readers the human impact of those events, and you have a story worth reading. Characters make a story. In context to Undertale, my basic plot explanation does not give enough to care about the game's world. It becomes interesting when you start playing the game and you meet these so-called monsters. By interacting with them, you start to feel a resemblance to what we humans are. They have their own personalities. They have feelings and traits that do not give off what we'd expect, for example, what a monster under our bed to be like. Our first encounter with one is with Flowey, and this is not a positive one, yet they seem to be the minority rather than the majority. We get to learn that kill or be killed is not a mentality everyone in the underground resonates with. We have a possibility to go non-lethal and spare everyone, even becoming friends with some of them. The one who helps the player understand the possibility of sparing others is Toriel. She is a literal depiction of a warm and sweet mother figure who guides the player through the tutorial and welcomes them into her cozy home. But when the player wants to leave this safe place, she becomes protective. She knows what dangers are out there and what might happen if she lets them out. At the end of this tutorial, you unfortunately end up in a battle with her. At first, I tried sparing her. I mean, she was the one who taught me this. Why shouldn't I treat her the same way? But it didn't seem to work. So I decided to kill her. And I immediately questioned myself if this was actually the morally good choice here. What did I do wrong? Well, I wasn't patient enough. In the end, we have a climactic fight with Flowey, the one who tried to kill us at the start of the game. Even if this was one of the most mind-boggling and craziest fights I've had in a game, the message I felt throughout my first gameplay was the same. No matter how impossible, aggressive, weird, or difficult that individual may be, compassion, patience, and determination are key aspects when interacting with someone. For me, in my first playthrough, Flowey was just a misunderstood individual who protected themselves. which is why I showed mercy to them as well. While this reflects my own experience, we should look at other ways Undertale enhances empathic immersion through the battle system. I won't go into much detail about different ways to do battles in games or anything like that, as this video is focused on storytelling. But I have to mention that while playing Fear and Hunger, I've realized that if you break down what most battle systems actually are, then you will only see a battle in a game as a puzzle or a mini-game. Fear and Hunger basically does it in the way that you have to cut off certain parts of the enemy's body to be able to attack the head. You might also have an RNG situation where if you lose, you instantly die. How Undertale works is that each individual monster has their own solution. This could be that you have to play with them, pet them, or whatever else that one monster needs from you. This gives them a personality which might make you feel more compelled to let them live because of this empathic connection you have. You can, if you want to, just kill everything you meet if you feel like it, but their personalities will still be represented in their attacks with minigames you have to survive through. Even outside the battles, you can interact with monsters who are a bit silly, but they don't seem to be any threat to the player. They're building snowmen, they're trying to survive by having their own little shops, or just celebrating some type of Christmas. Just like us humans, why would you want to hurt them? This is why, on my first playthrough, I decided to stay in this world instead of going back home. I had nothing else to compare with. How was my life up there? Who is my family? I'm not sure, but down here, I have friends. Even if they are odd, I still feel for them. According to Michael Breault, in a story for a game, or any storytelling at all, there needs to be something that motivates the audience to keep going. There has to be mysteries and subplots that reel the player back in. Undertale succeeds with this by using empathy to drive us forward. Some characters who wanted us to die for their own liberation now guide and cheer for us. With complex stories like Undertale or other JRPGs, when a subplot is resolved, a new one should arise. Undertale does it perfectly without giving away the full story immediately, and in the end, it hints that there's more to uncover than what you first thought. Well, this looks like the end of this video. We've gone through certain aspects of what a story is in a game. We can conclude that gameplay and story should be synergized, but the story should not take over from the gameplay. With the knowledge that the story should give context to mechanics, such as the stealth option in Metal Gear Solid, Undertale's spare action, or any other game, you will hopefully be able to see games from a different perspective. We've also dived into how important emotions are in storytelling. If we can't empathize with the NPCs, the event, or player character, then we won't have a reason to keep going in the story. Are there any games you think of where story and gameplay don't really make sense with each other? Or another game that succeeds in it? Let me know in the comments. Any other reflections are also welcome. As this is my first video of this project, I tried to not make it too long, but still let each concept have their screen time. Just remember, there's so much to creating a story for a game that I probably haven't gotten into yet. Thank you for taking your time, and see you in the next video.